Bubba Scrubba, Stream of Consciousness, Volume 1, Episode 31. Marker. Good morning, everybody. Well, good afternoon, I should say. It's Monday, mid-June. Yesterday was Flag Day. Consequently, it was also Trump's birthday. Out of a certain morbid curiosity, I watched the fights that were hosted on the White House lawn. And I don't really know how to explain it. First of all, first impressions. The backdrop was pretty unique. I don't want to say it was magnificent. I don't think it was appropriate to host that kind of event at the White House. I'm not sure why. It was a little awkward to see, first and foremost, the imagery of it. Combine the UFC, the octagon, and all of that with the White House, seat of government, seat of executive power, and to put it into one image is weird. That's the only word I can come up with. It's weird. To see the fighters coming out of like whatever that room is, that drawing room or ante room, whatever it is, underneath the portico where you walk in, and it looks just like kind of like almost like a museum, like your grandma's library or something. It's got some old furniture and some portraits up, and then these guys are warming up, or they come out of there and they're being flanked by American heroes, and no doubt that these guys, the people that were flanking them are, they're people in the military or law enforcement that did something or whatever, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but it's a very weird sight to see. It was a very weird sight to see, and again, the only other word I can come up with is inappropriate. I'm not sure. A lot of people I talk to, a lot of people that that I'm friends with or whatever, that are anti-Trump, basically were like, I'm not watching this farce, and I respect that. Because I had the ability to watch it without having to pay for it, I was more enticed just by, again, the spectacle of it, to just kind of watch it and see what it was all about. The other kind of word I guess I would use to describe it was, compared to what a UFC crowd usually is, the mood seemed very muted to me. It seemed very like the energy of the crowd was not overwhelming. It wasn't significant. It was almost as if people were barely cheering. It seemed kind of quiet. I don't know. I didn't watch from the very beginning, so I didn't see. I saw a clip of Trump and Dana White coming out, and it was, again, weird. It was tone deaf. It was awkward. It was, I guess, this sounds silly. I'm going to say, oh, Donald Trump lacks awareness, self-awareness. It's pretty self-evident, right? But maybe it's not the fact that he lacks self-awareness. It's the fact that the people that he surrounds himself with, whether they are doing it on purpose or not, are the prostitution of their personal morals in exchange for, the proximity to power, that they would do anything, that they would debase themselves in any way, that there is no bar that they would not go under in order to maintain and or increase that proximity to power. It's very distasteful for me specifically, because I've never been that kind of person. I was just watching a video. It was called The Downfall of the Show Entourage. And again, now I'm going to date myself, so this was a show from about 20 years ago that was on HBO, and at the time everybody, especially guys, were all about it. They were like, oh my God, this is a great show, what a great premise, oh, it's so funny, and there's all these celebutard cameos and beautiful women that are, models and stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it's like this kind of male wet dream, you know. And I remember people asking me, "Oh, did you watch the episode last night?" And I'd be like, "No." And they'd be like, "Oh, do you watch the show?" And I'd be like, "No." Like I never appealed to me. Same thing with The Apprentice, you know. I don't know how many millions of people watched that show. How many people came up to me over the years and said, "Oh man, did you see Trump on The Apprentice?" And I'd be like, "No." Be like, I mean, it was a good show, you know. You should check it out. I'd be like, "No, I don't watch that show. Never have, never will." I don't know why. I guess kind of goes back to my whole thing. And you know, if something is super popular, if something is like in pop culture, if something is super popular, I do the exact opposite than what most people do. Most people embrace it. Like, oh, this is the hot new thing. Oh, I'm jumping on the bandwagon. Kind of like MAGA, you know. Oh, this political movement. Oh, wow. You know, this is so fresh. let's try this on, and then watch it inevitably crash and burn, and then either you get amnesia that you were affiliated or supported it in any way, or you try to explain it away, you know, and be like, "Oh yeah, I was going through a dark phase in my life, and you know, this helped me get through it," or something along those lines. And anyway, yeah, I was watching this event, and I just kind of like, I wasn't so much revolted. It was just more like bizarre. And then like at a certain point, I don't know how many fights, there was like 2 fights or something. I don't know, I think there was 6 fights on the card altogether. I watched like the first 2 fights. Pretty boring. I have to say, as a caveat to that, you know, growing up and watching, you know, a lot of boxing before MMA became a thing, that seemed like obviously a very exciting blood sport, and there was a real technical skill to it. I mean, I think it is still tech. They don't call it the sweet science for no reason. I think as far as aesthetics and beauty and you know, just kind of sheer technical artistry, I don't think there's any combat sport that tops boxing. Now, you know, a lot of people say, well, this is boring, you know, boxing's boring. Maybe they're right. You know, a lot of it has to do with the personal charisma of fighters. And when, you know, your most charismatic fighter in recent memory is Floyd Mayweather, and whose whole brand is built on, you know, that he's got stacks of money around him and stuff like that. People don't identify with that shit, you know. People identify with like a character like Rocky, you know, and a lot of boxers, like even Mike Tyson, whatever, who started with nothing, came from nothing. You know, so, guys like Sonny Liston or Joe Frazier, or, you know, Mike Tyson, guys that were like petty criminals, you know, growing up, and used boxing as an escape hatch to a better life, and bettered themselves and bettered society by, you know, introducing themselves to the consciousness of people to say, here's a skill that I have, and do you appreciate that? And a lot of people used to appreciate people's boxing skill, and there used to be a lot of great fights, a lot of great fighters, a lot of characters, and you know, boxing is a showmanship sport, right? So you have to sell yourself, you have to sell the fight, you have to sell yourself. That's why Muhammad Ali was such, you know, is always, you know, always considered kind of in the top 2 or 3 of the greatest boxers of all time. Not only was he a technically great boxer, but his showmanship, you know. Guys even like Mike Tyson, you know, didn't have that. I mean, when he was first exploding onto the scene, you know, I mean, he was 19, 20 years old. He's very young, but with the lisp and the lack of education and, you know, just kind of, like, I wouldn't consider him like a master promoter. I mean, he did his promotions with his fists, right? And no, you know, at the time, people were not used to seeing that kind of power, that speed and power combination. But one of the reasons why Ali set himself apart was, well, one, his ability to be, and this is also is like a skill in pro wrestling. You know, as a pro wrestler, it's one thing, you got to have, you know, a nice physique, and you have to have a technical ability in the ring. But the thing that sets one person apart from another is the ability to get on the mic and cut a promo, and to engage the crowd in that regard. And if you can do that, You don't have to have the best physique in the world. You don't have to be the best ring technician. You could still be one of the top people in the corporation just because you can talk on the microphone. And so the same thing kind of goes to boxing, which is you're going to get more attention. You're going to bring more attention to yourself and to the sport the more that you're able to eloquently talk and or engage people with whatever it is. And then we won't talk about the other thing that sets him apart, which was his kind of social justice, his the stand he took against the federal government when they tried to draft him, for the Vietnam War, and he said no, and he did jail time and all that. That is a whole other level of personal accountability, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, nowadays boxing doesn't have the same je ne sais quoi because first of all, I guess, the MMA thing took off afterwards and people decided that, hey, we like the octagon better. We like the fact that there's punching, there's kicking, there's wrestling. It's a combination, right? That's why they call it mixed martial arts. And, for a period of time, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I used to know a lot of the fighters and I would get it, kind of involved in the whole thing because I was like, oh, this is cool, right? It was something different. It was something new. But a lot of these fights, they just kind of devolve into one guy mounting another and then leaning on him for 3 minutes, up against the chain link of the cage and stuff. And you're just like, it's kind of boring, like people want to see people throwing punches most of the time, right? And it's funny because my brother got me turned on to this thing, this Conor McGregor thing, this BKFC, the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. And it's like boxing but with the backdrop of MMA, so they don't have the octagon. It's like a circular cage that they're in, but they wear like just wraps. They don't wear any kind of padding or gloves or anything like that, and there's no kicking, there's no wrestling or anything like that. These guys have to stand, and it's actually girls too. I've seen there's girls that fight. They stand toe to toe and they just try to duke it out, bare knuckle style. And honestly, I think that's the most exciting thing out there right now. But beyond all that, the fights yesterday I didn't think were very entertaining. And then they kept doing, between fights. First of all, this is a pay-per-view and there's commercials. It's like, the one thing about pay-per-view, right? You're going to pay $50 or $70 or whatever it is to watch a fight. The one thing, you'll get tons of filler. You get tons of useless filler about bullshit or whatever between the fights. But you don't have to watch commercials. They even had commercials yesterday. It was like, geez. But they had these, like one of them was, back in December of 1775, when George Washington and the Continental Army crossed the Potomac, and they were doing these kind of, I don't know, CGI recreations of, these famous events in American history. And I mean, there was this one where they showed, the famous painting of Washington in the boat crossing. And they did a kind of like, CGI kind of recreation of that. And they zoomed up. And I almost expected it to have his face changed and have it be Trump's face. I swear to God, that's what this guy wants. That's what this guy thinks he is. He thinks that he's George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and FDR and, all of these great presidents all wrapped into one person. And that, during his 2 terms, he's had to deal with, all of these crazy things that puts him in the same boat as these great presidents. It's exasperating. And I was watching that particular segment. I think it was between the second and third fight. And I was just like, or the third and fourth fight or something. And I was just like, no, I'm done. I'm done with this. And didn't watch the rest of it. Didn't see this, the main event where this guy, after he wins his fight and they're interviewing him and he's like, Michelle Obama's a man, or something. It's like, whether you love the Obamas or hate the Obamas or the Bidens or anybody in Democratic politics, to show that little amount of class, to if that's what you're gonna say, I mean, it used to be that these guys used to say, I want to give all the glory to God, Or I want to thank my trainers, and I want to thank my manager, and I want to thank my wife who supported me. Or I want to thank the fans, because without them, we wouldn't have this. And the first thing he does is pander to the lowest common denominator in this political coalition. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. You know, in real life, when you walk past people that, let's say, you're prejudiced against, and I had a video about this previously saying that everybody's prejudiced in their own way, shape, or form. Doesn't matter what race, color, or creed you are prejudiced against somebody, somewhere, for some reason. And I'm not saying it's somebody's fault. I'm not saying it's even cognizant that you're doing it. You know, if you were raised in a certain household and your parents were a certain way, then you're going to that's going to make an imprint on you, you know, and you might not even notice it, you know. But the point is that when we're walking around in general society, people aren't stopping people that they would be prejudiced against and insulting them for no reason. Most of the time. 99% of the time. 98% of the time. The other 1% to 2% usually turns into some kind of battle royale, or somebody gets shot, and then that's what they report on the news. Oh, racist guy goes on, you know, whatever. And so a very, 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 very small percentage of the time do people really speak their minds to each other. Otherwise, you pass somebody at the mall or on the street, you don't think twice. Maybe you're thinking something in your head, but you would never stop and turn around and say, hey, you're a man, or you're a monkey, or whatever. You would never say that. You'll only do it in the safety of your house, where you're typing it on a phone, or you're sitting around a barbecue with your buddies, you know, or whatever. They're all like-minded, right? Where there's no consequence for it. And so the fact that maybe that's the most revolting thing about the Trump presidency is, I mean, it's both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is, well, let's start with the curse. The curse is that it has emboldened people to tap into their worst instincts and feel okay with expressing thoughts and just grievances that need to be kept to themselves. Okay? That you just need to like shut up and not speak your mind about every little racist thought or prejudiced thought that comes through your mind. You don't have the right, I mean, you have a First Amendment right to say whatever you want, but in decent society, you know, the old adage of if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all applies. And most of us adhere to that. The benefit of this is that we're starting to, you know, it basically just shows you that racism and, you know, just xenophobia and sexism and, you know, blah, 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 all the isms and whatever are alive and well in this country. They're alive and well in this society. They never went anywhere. And, you know, no matter how much progress we think that we're making, it's, you know, it's one step forward, two steps back always. And the fact that, you know, we have to see this every day while it is distasteful is illuminating, and hopefully will allow us as a, you know, a society, as a nation, as a world to learn from this and get better and do better. So, yeah, anyway, I'm not sure what else to say about all this. Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. I have a feeling that a lot of people felt the same way. Just like dirty, icky, you know, like watching this thing. And, you know, the people that are like on the comments that I'm reading that are like, this was a great night for America and I'm so proud to be an American. I mean, they're either bots or, you know, Chinese bots, Russian bots. I mean, I have a hard time believing that these are like, you know, rational people that are typing this, but, you know, humans typing this. But, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, well, I've slowed down my video pace here. We'll continue to post stuff. And, you know, I hope to hear from you guys in the comments or whatever. I hope everybody's having a good day. We'll talk to you soon.